Good day, everybody. How are you doing today? Another episode, Pirkei Avos with Rabbi Chaim Coffman, live from Israel. It's always a joy to be with him and learn the ethics of the fathers. You cannot go wrong with ethics. It's something that you can put into play into your life. It's always a joy to be with him. He always makes it a fun time and teaches us some wonderful, relevant Torah. So let's just jump right in and see how the rabbi's doing today. Rabbi Coffman, you got the mic, sir. Always good to be with you. And I think we're continuing with number 17 today, right?
We are still Mr. 17. Hopefully we'll work our way through. I don't know if we'll get through it all, but whatever, we'll see. See if we get sidetracked or not. And, you always say how everyone enjoys it. Well, anyone who wants to get ticked off, this is a good place to do it. So we'll try and, ethics definitely not an easy thing. Certainly changing one character trait, very difficult, even throughout our lifetime. So the Mishnah, again, Mishnah 17, says, Shimon and his son says, all my days been raised among the sages, found nothing better for oneself than silence. Not study, but practice. We're going to speak about that. Is the main thing. One who talks excessively brings on sin. So anyone's big mouth got a big problem. So potentially, yeah. Well, I'm almost up there. So we spoke last week. Spoke actually quite a bit about fear, right, and about people putting in fear and how I'm supposed to live. And all that. So when we speak about, silence, or we speak about speaking, in general, what if a person, we spoke about, speaking Lashon Hara, speaking badly against others. What if someone says something, they don't cause any damage, right? There's no damage. Even let's say it gets back to the person. Or even if it doesn't get back to the person, it's not going to cause them any damage. Not business, not personality-wise, other things. People aren't necessarily going to hate him or whatever the case is, but it doesn't cause any damage. Nonetheless, maybe we'll say if it's beneficial, right? Maybe it's beneficial for other people to know what this person does, right? You're allowed to warn others about somebody. You want to make sure that somebody is going to be warned if it's something potentially dangerous, someone's going to cause damage, whatever. It doesn't mean you're allowed to believe it 100% according to the laws of Lashon Hara, but you're allowed to guard yourself. You're allowed to guard, certainly guard others. You cannot believe it, though, 100%. Still, over here, even if it's beneficial, person has to limit what they say. Certainly not expound too much, since it could definitely lead to trouble. Now, obviously, there are going to be limitations over here. They're going to be conditions. What a person's allowed to relate. So even if someone potentially is going to cause someone damage, or I'm allowed to guard myself against it, if I want to tell other people, there are certain conditions. Certainly one condition is I'm not allowed to exaggerate, right? I'm not allowed to exaggerate. I have to hear it first person. If I don't hear it first person, okay, it's hearsay, right? That's exactly what Lashon Hara is, right? And certainly, most likely a lie or potentially a lie. So a person has to hear it firsthand. Now, if it's not heard firsthand, you give it over, right? You better make sure you give over the details correctly. And you have to make clear you didn't see this yourself. Right? In other words, someone's going to say, well, how can I rely on this? You say 100%. I heard it from somebody who heard it from the person, right? So in the vernacular, we call that you heard it secondhand. Now, hearing secondhand, you don't always get the right information. Regardless, you got to be careful, right? You definitely have to be careful, because if you expound on it too much, you may kill everybody in the process. And people tend, in general, to exaggerate. So, therefore, if you hear something and you want to warn others about it, it has to be firsthand. You have to get the details right. You can't miss out on certain details. That changes the whole, that can certainly change the whole face of things. So you certainly have to be careful with that. Now, obviously, we're talking about something where it's beneficial. If it's something frivolous, things don't matter to anything, right? Politics, sports, entertainment, whatever it is, even though maybe people are getting excited now, baseball started. So I don't know, they have so many fans, in the stands or whatever the case is. I just heard something where for football, if they actually start, they're going to have like half the people in the stadium, right? Instead of having like 40,000 or whatever, they're going to have like 15,000. Or 17,000. I don't know what that means. Like, you have a seat in between. Everyone's wearing masks. I don't know. I don't know exactly that better than, how that stops things or doesn't or whatever the case is. Regardless, we're talking about something obviously important, right? We're not talking about, something not important. Now, people will say, well, isn't politics important? Isn't blasting Trump important? Come on. That's like, that's like second nature. It's the elections. Why can't I speak about the elections? So the idea is it's brought down, it's an interesting story. It's brought down that person's only given a certain amount of words in this world. So let's say a person comes into this world, all things being equal, he's given, I don't know, 1.5 billion. He's given it 1.5 billion words. This guy's a motor mouth. He might die at 20. You never know. Or he might die late, or whatever the case is. So there was a story that it was actually on a festival, and someone was actually there. I think they were at home. They were in the middle of speaking, and they said something, and they dropped dead of a heart attack, right in the middle of speech, right in the middle of what they said. Right now, you say, okay, that was if we have proper Torah philosophy, we'll say, okay, it was that person's time to go. Okay. Right? I'm not going to say not. God runs the world. It can happen anytime. Very good. But why would it happen in the middle of speech? Right? Why would it happen? There are different factors going on. Rabbi told the stories talking about redemption, and where, the Messiah can come obviously at any time. We speak about the destruction of the temple, which is coming up this week, the fast of the 9th of Av, which is on Thursday. And he brought down different things, about redemption, right? One of the things he said, there was somebody that the Vilna Gaon, Rav Elijah Vilna, wrote a commentary on the Zohar, right? It's commentary that's studied by obviously people who learn Kabbalah. It's called Sefer Tsinusa, right? So in his commentary, somebody had figured out, according to his commentary, the date when the Messiah is supposed to come. So he's telling people, it's not going to be now, it's going to be in the future, whatever it is, but he figured out the calculation, right? So he was talking to people, rabbis, other people, about this whole thing. And he said he figured it out, and he wanted to reveal so people would have, understanding and know when the Messiah is going to come. Right? We obviously don't try and figure this out. The Rambam says there are contradictions all over the place in the prophets. And since there are contradictions, nobody really knows. It's really clouded, etc. when the Messiah is supposed to come. There are times where it's more possible to come than other times, whatever the case is. So he says, but if you try and figure it out and you come to a certain time and you say, it's going to happen this time, what happens if it doesn't? You become a heretic, right? If obviously that's not good. So the Rambam says, don't bother trying to figure it out. So anyway, this person comes along and he's telling over the story, right? And he's saying, I figured it out. He said, according to the Vilna Gaon, he looked into it, this, that. He figured it out. Before he had a chance to say anything else, he dropped dead of a heart attack in front of everybody. Right? He wanted to give over, and it could be he knew, obviously. Obviously, God understood. He understands. He knows what the thoughts of men are. Person dropped dead right in the middle. Right in the middle. So what was my point? My point was you're given a certain amount of words. Right? Or it could be person wants to reveal something, right? Like, Jacob was blessing his kids. He wanted to tell them about the end of days. He wasn't allowed to, right? He wasn't allowed to, and then he forgot all about it or whatever it was, and that was it. So even if a person's granted a certain amount of words to speak, if God doesn't want you to say it, right, it's not going to come out. He'll stop you. Right? Either he'll make you go on to something else, he'll make you forget, or whatever, or he'll just knock you out. You'll die. Right? Yeah, you wanted to say something on that?
Well, I realize your point is about, limits to talking and how we shouldn't. But, I mean, just to back up a second, where you were sharing the story about the person who was trying to talk about the coming of Messiah,
right?
Mashiach. I've heard it said from one rabbi that the closer it gets to it, the more obvious the times become, and therefore it reaches a culmination point where it becomes almost proper to talk about it, where it becomes almost proper to recognize and easier to spot.
I'll tell you something. People thought, and people made the mistake. People made the mistake, and it looked like time was ripe at the end of the Holocaust. Right. Now, millions of people died. Right? Now, it wasn't exactly what the prophets say, because the prophets say a third's going to die, a third's going to get injured, and a third is going to be, and a third's going to get saved. Whatever the case is, didn't exactly happen like that. But what happened directly after the Holocaust? What happened directly after the Holocaust is the state of Israel was found. Right? Now, you can say whatever you want. People are anti-Zionists, people are pro-Zionist, whatever it wants. It's like God threw us a bone, right? Over here. He said, with everything that went on during the Holocaust, 6 million Jews died, most of Jewry in Europe, right? Europe, and Russia, whatever, were, totally wiped off the face of the map. So that seemingly was a ripe time. Was a ripe time for the Messiah to come. Not only that, everyone, the UN, the famous UN, granted that the Jewish state, Israel, was going to be to the Jews. Okay, split it with the Arabs, whatever it was, right? Whatever the declaration, exactly was. But what happened?
The Balfour Declaration.
Right, but what happened afterwards? The Messiah didn't come. Right, it didn't come. Now, some people say today, while I'm on that, some people say that there's going to be this great war of Gog and Magog, right? And Malachi chapter 14 speaks about it. Some say because of the war of World War I, World War II, it's not going to be that type of war. Now, it's hard to imagine. You read Jeremiah, you read the other prophets, they talk about a bloodbath, right? They talk, talk millions of people are going to die. Says the students of the Vilna Gaon, Rav Elijah Vilna more than 250 years ago. They said that the Vilna Gaon said in the war of Gog and Magog, it's going to take 12 minutes. That's what he said.
12 minutes.
12 minutes. Now, you're talking 250 years ago. That's before airplanes. That's before missiles. Before anything. Still using bows and arrows. Guns. Right? But they're no airplanes.
Non-repeater rifles, yeah.
Yeah, they're not. There's nothing. Right? There are no missiles. Now, again, how it's going to happen and whatever, the whole discussion, it's hard to imagine that we're talking about a spiritual world, not a war, not a physical war, because we see the writing on the wall, We see what's going on, certainly with the Muslims. The Muslims are very significantly small minorities all over Europe, right? Canada, other places, just a powder keg waiting to happen. And the Malbim, more than 100 years ago, in his commentary on Malachi chapter 14, said there's going to be a war between Edom and Yishmael. Who's Edom? The Western world, right? Esav represents the Western world. Who's Yishmael? Yishmael is the Arabs, right? The Muslims. Now, says the Malbim there that there's going to be a disagreement in religion. Well, yeah, go figure, right? There's going to be a disagreement in religion. It's going to be a major bloodbath. They're going to realize we're doing everything, we're fighting against each other. Whose fault is it? Of course, it's the Jews' fault. They're going to march to Jerusalem. That's when the Messiah comes, and it's the beginning of the end. Now, he wrote this more than 100 years ago. The Muslims, the Arabs, whatever you want to call them, they never had power anywhere, right? They were more or less like the Bedouins of today. They were nomads. They didn't have, tracts of land, right? We mentioned, a number of times the Palestinians today never existed. It was made up by the UN.
Different lifestyle.
Sanctified by the Israelis, stupid as they were, gave them a foothold. They had nothing. They had absolutely zero. And when the English were here, there was an Arab entity in Israel that had a government, that had all these things. They had nothing. When the Turks were here, when the Ottomans were here, there was nothing. You had people from Transjordan, you had people from Lebanon, you had Egyptian, whatever, but you didn't have an entity, you had nothing, right? So, so that being the case, before 9/11, right? Let's go back in time. Before 9/11, if you would have learned this Malbim on Zechariah chapter 14, you're like, okay, good luck. Nice interpretation, but doesn't look like it's in reality, right? After 9/11, after blowing up half of Afghanistan looking for bin Laden, right? They say, hey, this is not a war against Islam. Sure, Joey Suzu, he's lying, right? They blow up half of Afghanistan. They don't find him. Eventually they kill him, but obviously Islam and the Western world don't coexist, right? So, before 9/11, we wouldn't have thought such a thing. So now the writing's on the wall. Doesn't mean it has to happen that way. There are many things, that can happen. There's a medrash that says in Psalms it says that if there's going to be a war, it's going to start with the king of Paras. Where is Paras? Modern day Iran. Could happen that way, right? There are different ways, different possible ways it could happen. Nobody knows, right? So someone's going to say, what's your opinion? So it doesn't matter what my opinion is. There are many different opinions, right? How possibly it could happen. It's very hard, as I mentioned before, very, very hard to say it's a spiritual world, a war, right? No, it definitely looks like the world's going to, totally explode, right? The only question is, one. So you see, by the, just by this idea, no one disagrees. We're living in messianic times. I don't think anyone, disagrees. Sure. I don't think anyone disagrees on that. The question, how it's going to be, et cetera, but by the end of World War II, when the Nazis are destroyed and, the state of Israel is born, people would have said, this is it. Now that we're going to have the land of Israel, you have an ingathering the exiles, someone will come along, boom, that should be the end, right? That should be, the coming of the Messiah. Didn't happen, right? You see what's going on today. Anything could happen anytime. Could happen today, could happen tomorrow, could happen in a week, could happen in a month, right? Is it going to happen that way again? If I was a betting man, I'd probably say yes, but, who knows, right? It's clouded in mystery. Nobody knows for sure. I think definitely the writing's definitely on the wall, over here. So what I mentioned before. So we mentioned that, speaking about frivolous things or things in the world that don't matter, a person's only limited, right? They're limited with the amount of words that they have. So you're going to tell me, okay, so I can't speak about Trump, right? It's funny, greatest thing to speak about. Can't speak about him. Sports is off limits. Entertainment's off limits. Can't speak about tiddlywinks. What in the world are we going to speak about? What is there to speak about?
Ethics.
Right? So, we'll speak about the CFL. No, we're not going to speak about the CFL. What's the person going to speak about? Only words of Torah. Right? They're going to speak of things that are going to inspire someone to be closer to God. Right? Why is that? Because rabbinical scholars today are like holy vessels, right? And you want to attach yourself to them as much as possible. Now, you're living in this world. We're living in a world of fantasy. Even though the Ramchal says in Derech Hashem, you have to go through this world and you have to suffer and go through different things in order to reach your true potential, right? To bring out dormant character traits or whatever our mission is in this world. So if you're only here for 70 years, King David says, you're only here for 70 years. If you have strength, you get 80 years. And what'd you do in that time? Right? You know, how much non-kosher food, God forbid, did you eat? How much garbage did you speak about? How much time did you waste? Very easy to figure out, right? Before a person goes to sleep, think about what they accomplished or didn't accomplish during the day, right? Did I learn? Didn't I learn? Did I pray? Didn't I pray? Did I say things I shouldn't have? Did I waste time? It's very easy to pinpoint, where a person is holding the world. See, we're getting close to the 9th of Av, right? The culmination, fast day of the destruction of both temples, right? The 9th of Av, 2.5 weeks after the 9th of Av, guess what? That's the month of Elul. What's the month of Elul? It's 40-day preparation before Yom Kippur, right? 30 days after the month of Elul, the first day of the month of Elul, what's going to be? It's going to be Rosh Hashanah, right? A Jew is going to hear after prayers, after the second day of the month of Elul, you're going to hear the shofar. It's already going to be preparation, right? And Rosh Hashanah itself is the new year. It's all about judgment, Jews and non-Jews, right? Singular, plural, meaning the world also. People are going to get judged. The world itself, is going to get judged. So the question is going to be, a person may forget like what they've done during the year, right? They may not remember. So always good. I think if a person's honest, which probably most of us aren't, but if a person would be really honest, they would take stock every day of what they do. They'd look in the mirror, take an honest look in the mirror and say, okay, this is what I have to work on. This is what I failed at. This is not helping me in my mission, and all that. So what does that do? That prepares a person and makes them understand what their purpose is. Now, it doesn't mean, next day they may say the same thing. The day after that, they may say the same thing, right? They're going to have, they'll have different trials and tribulations, whatever they may be. But at the end of the day, where am I holding in the world, right? So therefore over here, if a person's going to speak, why are you speaking about other stuff, right? This other stuff, it's fun, it's entertaining, right? All these other things, and it's enjoyable. No one's going to say it's not enjoyable, but at the end of the day, even if it's enjoyable, right, it distracts me. It's a total distraction. I think people probably jumping up and down for joy. Baseball finally started. Football's around the corner. I think people going out of their minds. They're going absolutely out of their minds, staying home and there's nothing on, except NASCAR and roller derby or watching the, Korean baseball or whatever, right? Professional wrestling, who knows? Whatever people are watching, right? It's a crazy, it's a crazy time. But if you don't have any of that, if you don't have the distraction, so what in the world do you do? You go out of your mind. If you're a Jew, you got plenty what to learn. You got plenty what to think about. There's ethics, right? We're not even past Mishnah 17, right? We've been doing this for months. Haven't got past chapter 1 yet, right? You got ethics. You got Jewish philosophy. You got Torah. You got prophets. You got writing. Keep me busy. No, I'd say, there's not much to learn, right? I can't do that much in ritual. Well, that's true, right? You can't make up holidays. That's true. What do you mean? There's not enough to learn? I can keep you busy for the next 250 years. Nothing to talk about. The question is what is our focus? And if our focus is on these things that distract us, you'll get distracted, right? God, a person will get upstairs after 120 years, and God's going to say, well, you don't really have too much to say, do you? So what do you mean? You say, what about my Torah? What about mitzvahs? So a person says, God, I understand now what absolute truth is, but you know how distracting the world is? You know how easy it is to get sucked in? God says, of course it's easy to get sucked in. You don't think I had a part in that? People put out their things. They did whatever, right? But I didn't say you had to get sucked into it. there was a Torah out there. You should have tuned in, right? So, someone had a Q&A a few weeks back, and there was a whole question. What about people who grew up as Christians? What about people born into being a Christian, being a Hindu, right? There are 80,000 different religions in the world. We probably only know half a dozen, right? So obviously all of them can't be right. Can only be one that's right. Obviously we think we have the right one, right? But even so, someone who grows up as a Hindu, right? Someone who grows up as a Hindu, isn't that against one of the no-hide laws? What's one of the no-hide laws? Is idolatry. Idolatry is forbidden. So someone asked me, okay, I grew up as a Christian. I came out of it. Most people I deal with came out of Christianity. Very good. But what about the people that got stuck? What about the people not taught the question? Of course they're not taught the question, because the Christians want everyone to be stupid, right? Because if they start the question, they're not going to have any answers. They're going to say, you got to have faith, right? We'll start singing Prince. Got to have faith, right? All these things. Forget it. It's not about faith. It's about knowledge. That's exactly what we're trying to prove. Right, on Tanakh talk about belief in God, right? I'm going to hit that this week as well. Cosmology. We're going to speak about world of design, theologically, etc., whatever it's called. And, we're going to try and see and understand through nature, through logic, why there has to be a God. So then, once you understand why there has to be a God, now you have to see what your position is in this world and what I'm supposed to do. But someone said, but if these people grow up as Christians, they grew up as Hindus, it's not their fault, right? Totally not their fault. All right, I'm not saying it's their fault, but, right, there's always a but over here. And the but is, why is ignorance bliss over here? In other words, they're born into that. And if I was born in Russia, I'd be a communist. Probably true, right? If I was Chinese, I was born in China, I'd be waving the red flag, right? I'd be singing Mao's, I don't know, whatever he sings, whatever he believes in, we'd be all talking about that, right? But again, did God give us a brain? Did he give us the ability to see the world? We're not robots. We're not animals, right? Animals only are programmed DNA. So if they're programmed DNA, it's not my fault, right? They're not going to get punished. They're programmed. If we are not programmed DNA, we're given a spiritual soul. Every person has a spiritual soul, some aspect of it at least. Whatever it is, we're given the ability to know there's right and wrong, right? So you're going to say in philosophical terms, in spiritual terms, I should also be able to identify that. Well, if I grew up as, in China, or I grew up, as a Hindu, or whatever, why is God going to hold that against me? He's going to hold it against you because you could have looked at the world and seen this is a bunch of malarkey, right? You could have seen it doesn't make sense. Right, there's a lot of stuff all over, Facebook, YouTube. You could have come to absolute truth. You decided not to. Okay, right? That is your choice. You're gonna say, well, we're brought up in the church, taught not to question. So how come there's so many people coming out of the church? Right? You can't use that as an excuse because then everyone's a bunch of robots. Right? But someone wanted to argue that you can't prove we have free will. 100%, because an atheist could always say, it's not really true, right? Because someone was sort of attacking me on that, about certain things that I brought up to answer against, atheists about the, about a moral imperative and about the fact that, the world is an expanding universe. If it is an expanding universe, obviously someone's making it expand, right, etc. So in that case, if that has been proven scientifically, let's just say, so how can an atheist just sit there and go, blah, 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 how can he not say anything, right? It shows there is a creator. So now the only question is, okay, if it shows there's a creator, doesn't it mean the creator wants something from me? That's what it should show, right? Is it 100% proof? Not going to say it's 100% proof. We're going to speak about a world of design. That's what theological is, the world of design. We're going to speak about DNA. We're going to speak about the eye. We're going to speak about the brain. We're going to speak about all kinds of things that show beyond the shadow of a doubt this is not human, right? A human could not have done this. Not just by one big bang and one explosion and all that. Even if you say that and all the amino acids were there and everything else, the question's going to be, okay, what keeps it going? Why is it infinite? Why is it going on for generations, throughout the millennia? right? What is making it go? So you can't say, well, it's just a mistake. Well, we're going to hit evolution also. Can't be just a mistake. Can't be just a mutation. But the argument's going to be it's a world of design. If it's a world of design, and you have to see beyond the shadow of a doubt, it's a world of design. Once you prove that, then the question is, okay, what do you want from me? So there must be a designer. So how do I know? How do I know what I'm supposed to do? Well, the logic will tell you, do what the designer tells you. Right? So you're going to say, well, how do I know that? Who's the real designer? You know, the real designer is God himself. He wrote it in a book. Oh, I don't hold to the book. Wait a minute. You just said there's a designer. Right? So you go back in this logic. But that's not really the point for now. But the idea, you know, the idea is if you show information, then either you have to say the information doesn't make sense. Right? You have to knock off the information and say this isn't true. Or what I think most people will do is will say, even if it's true, how is that relevant to my life? Right? Even if you prove this or you prove that, I can still have my doubts. I can still say, nah, that's not a proof for anything. I don't know. If it's proven scientifically, right? I showed from a moral perspective, right? What was the question? The question was, murder is always forbidden. Right? So we mentioned at least 7 or 8 different scenarios where it could possibly be from a human perspective, right? In other words, to say that, okay, maybe it's going to be permitted for this generation, right? We're going to permit murder in these cases for this generation. Okay, what happened to previous generations where it was forbidden? What made you the right to decide, right? You say, I go according to the majority. What's the majority? You say you're the majority now. What about before? What about after? There are a lot of moral issues, right, that are asked, and essentially they all get knocked off for different reasons that don't hold water. That murder is always going to be forbidden, right, universally. It's never going to change. It's not going to be relative. So how can you say, oh, just knock that off? That's not true. People could say this. How could they say that? We just gave 10 examples. You gave 10 clear-cut examples where at the end they all get knocked off. The only conclusion that you can come to make something universal and 100% absolute is it has to be something supernatural. Doesn't make sense otherwise. You want to come up with other potential things or whatever, you can try and do that. But if you have enough information, this is the only point I wanted to make, is that if you have enough information, right, whether it's from an expanding universe, whether it's from a moral perspective, whether it's from a historical perspective, that we're not even going to hit because there's too much information the other way. What about cosmological? We're going to see that, a world of design, a historical perspective, 5 different ways to potentially come to believe that God exists, right? Now again, is that going to be final? You're not going to say, oh, that's the answer, whatever, is it 100%? Nothing's ever 100%, right? But if you have enough information, you're going to have to say, I have no choice. Because if I say I'm still going to hold evolution, and evolution doesn't hold water, or the moral principle doesn't hold water, then you're not intellectually honest. Right. Yeah. So over here,
probability,
yeah. So over here, you want to stay within Torah. Right? I want to get back to what we're saying here. You want to stay within Torah because if you go outside of Torah, a person will get distracted. Right? And that's exactly what happens. That's actually a good segue for what we said before. For a very simple reason is that they hear all these different things, atheism, they have feminism, whatever it is, and they get caught up in the day. Right? I'm not saying everyone's reading every single article about all this stuff and they're getting brainwashed. They got brainwashed enough because most people don't think it through. They probably read a couple articles on Wikipedia and that's it. And that's where they form their opinion. I was just, thinking today, people say they're agnostic. Right? What is an agnostic? Agnostic means someone who's got doubts. They got doubts about God's existence. Okay, so let me ask all you agnostics out there: how much time have you really thought about it? How much effort have you put into finding out if God is really there or not? Probably not very much. Right? You say, no, I have doubts. Okay, let's see the doubts. Let's hear the doubts. Let's see if we can knock off any of the doubts. Mm-hmm. Right? What's something someone's going to say? Obviously, the most important thing will be, why do bad things happen to good people? Right? Why is there evil? People will throw that out. Okay, that's one issue. how much time have they really thought? If you give, I said, okay, I got a few good books to read. You want to read it? Then you break them down and see, right? But someone who's agnostic, I don't believe for a second they really thought about it that much. I don't believe they read books about it. It really bothers them. They stay up late at night. They just say, okay, I'm not an atheist. I'm certainly not a believer. So where am I? I'm in the middle. It's kind of like, you ask Jews today, where do you fall in the Jewish spectrum? You say, well, I'm not Reform. I'm certainly never going to be Orthodox, so I'm conservative. Okay, do you know what conservative means? Do you know what their philosophy is? Let's break it down. Let's see what it means. Let's see if it makes sense. They're like, well, I'm never going to be Orthodox. That wasn't my question. Are you interested in truth, or are you interested in just being happy and having a little bit or whatever? Okay, that's something else, right? That is something else. So today, people get caught up in all this stuff. Social media, politics, sports, spend days and nights speaking about things that are irrelevant in service to God. Why? Because it's interesting. It's distracting. It's fun. It takes away the pressure of the everyday. Of course it does. Very good. So what? Right? I still don't have an obligation to serve God. Even we're living in crazy times. I still have to serve Him. I still have to pray. I still have to keep the Sabbath. I still have to keep holidays. I still have to do all these things. If I still have to do all these things, why am I getting distracted? Right? So I mentioned last week, one of my classes, I don't remember which one, that the Arizal, Rabbi Zechariah, says that how can a person ever sin? He said a person can only sin if their mind is free from Torah. Right? In other words, you could say there's an evil inclination. We have an evil inclination. It causes us to do things. We get carried away, blah, blah, blah. Very good. Right? But shouldn't a person's focus always be on Torah? Even if they're outside, let's say they're waiting for the bus, going somewhere, whatever it is, shouldn't there be minds in Torah instead of looking at a screen? Yes. So why are they wasting their time looking at other stuff? Because they're afraid they might miss might miss a news item on the way, getting on the bus or getting in the car, or, we'll give you 10 minutes. You give us 10 minutes, we'll give you the world, all the same news over and over and over again. What do I have to do? What do I have to, know so much or hear what's going on? It's all depressing anyway, most of the time. So what happens? What happens is, says Rabbi Zechariah, says the Arizal, our minds are mush. Why are they mush? Because we let them be free from Torah. Once they're free from Torah, we let all the garbage seep in. And again, I'm not saying it's not interesting and it's not fun, right? And it's not distracting. Of course it is. But remember this fundamental principle, right? And this should keep a person on the straight path. Is this good for my service to God or not? And if it's not good to my service to God, I'm out. I shouldn't be doing it, right? Now, even if it isn't, my Rabbi tells the stories on a boat going to Europe, forget where he was going, and there was somebody there on the boat, a doctor, gave a whole talk about smoking, right? And you're talking like 60 years ago, more, 70 years ago, or even more. So he was giving this whole talk about how smoking is bad for you. So after the talk, what is the first thing he did? Lit up a cigarette. So my Rabbi asked him, I don't understand. If you're speaking about how bad it is, and how bad smoking is, how can you smoke? It's going to take, it's going to take years. It's going to take years off your life. And he said, listen, I'd rather lose years of my life than give up this habit. This habit is just too enjoyable, right? Now, obviously for a Jew, it doesn't make sense. It totally doesn't make sense. You tell me, well, person will lose their portion of the world to come, or they'll get punished in this world, they'll get punished in the next world if they do this, that, and the other thing. So why give up 10 minutes of pleasure? Why not give it up if you know what you're going to suffer for? You're going to say, come on, it's Tom and Jerry, right? It's enjoyable, right? It's Calvin and Hobbes, right? It's football. It's enjoyable. Why shouldn't I enjoy for 10 minutes, right? But again, you just admitted that it's probably not good for me. Right? You just admitted it's not good for my soul, but it's enjoyable. So a person would rather say without knowing anything, and we don't really know, that much. As my Rebbe says, I've never met anyone been in that world and come back. So we don't, you talk about heaven and hell, you talk about the punishment. Yeah, we do believe in it, etc. We've heard certain things about it. Okay. but at the end of the day, you're alive and kicking in this world. So how easy is it going to be, right? How easy is it going to be to give up something like that if it's going to have a negative effect? I'm not talking about, I'm not talking about gambling. I'm not talking about drinking, whatever. I'm talking about things, things that are bad for a person's spiritual health, right? And at the end of the day, even if they admit that, right? Even if they admit that, what's going to be? They're too steeped in, right? In other words, it's so much a part of them, they can't cut it down, right? Or they can't give it up, right? So someone says, I'll give up years of my life because I enjoy smoking too much. Okay, right? That means the desire is so strong they can't fight against it. So a person can't blame God and say, look, you gave this whole strong thing. Yeah, but I also gave you the ability to overcome it, right? That ability to overcome it is called Torah, right? A little bit of Torah, right? A little bit of light pushes away a lot of darkness. And so therefore, if it pushes away a lot of darkness, so I should give up. I should give it up. I shouldn't have anything to do with it, right? And if I don't do that, what's going to happen? The person can get destroyed in the next world. So why is there a disconnect? Why is there a disconnect between the brain and the heart? The brain understands what is right. The heart has difficulty, right? Because the heart desires. So you have to get over this brain-heart disconnect, right? And the reality is that if someone can't do that, or it's too hard to give up this, this aspect or whatever it is in the evil inclination, so that means we're not really true believers. That's what it means. In other words, you're going to say, well, it's not true. I really believe in reward and punishment. I pray 3 times a day. I keep the holidays. I do the best that I can do. But you're lacking here. You are lacking and let other things destroy you, and become part of you. And it's much more difficult to jumpstart the brain when a person's involved. Just give one example. Somebody, I deal with on a regular basis that has problems addicted to video games, right? It definitely happens. Candy Crush, other thing, whatever it is, whatever the game is, there are people totally addicted. So the person says, how can it be if I listen to a YouTube video, I try and learn, I get distracted? I said, well, it's very easy because this other stuff's a lot more interesting, right? And once you're addicted to other things, it's much harder to get into the spiritual because your physical side, so to speak, takes over. And, even if a person plays 10 minutes, 15 minutes or whatever, it's like light years that it takes a person to overcome that in order to get back to where they were before. It's destructive. So therefore, the fun things that a person wants to do, again, I'm not going to say they're not fun. Certainly not going to say they're not interesting. It could very well be interesting. At the same time, they are destructive if you want to learn and become closer to God. Yeah, question.
Well, Rabbi, I was just, thinking, in this world, almost everything from the day we're born is destroying us at the physical level. I mean, I came from a steel town where, steel mills were churning out all kinds of pollution and, hot summer days, the air was not the nicest. And there was always, air quality advisories. And I know there's other locales and stuff. It's just not a healthy place to be. Does that mean you're shortening your life by living there, and we should all, run to the bastion of the cleanest possible corner of the planet? I mean, is there not a point where being thankful for something that is maybe, contributes to that degree of, you could say, passing away, like smoking, like you mentioned, somebody who has the occasional puff, is he really killing himself? Well, we know that medically. But, how much is it going to shorten his day? We think of food. This is something that you guys give great thanks for. It's all part of Shabbat, it's intertwined. And the reality is, if somebody comes with the right attitude and does something in this world, the days, the meter, the sands are going through the hourglass. I mean, from the moment we're born, it's almost, you could literally say that everything you do, you could track it back and say it's not bad for you. There's more you can do. I guess, is there not a stage where we can live in this world with a degree of thankfulness and maybe partake of something that, is taboo for someone, but,
All right, so let's see what the Torah says. Mentioned this before. Leviticus chapter 19, verse 1 says, Hashem spoke to Moshe saying, verse 2, speak to the entire assembly of the children of Israel. Say to them, you shall be holy, for holy am I, Hashem, your God. You have to be holy because God is holy. Difference of opinion what that means. Comes along, Rashi says, stay away from forbidden relationships. Immorality, that's what it means. I'm holy, stay away from forbidden relationships, right? Because what do we speak about before chapter 18? All kinds of forbidden relationships, right? Who you're not allowed to be with, right? So it comes on the Ramban, says Nachmanides over there. It's not talking about forbidden relationships, right? It's talking about even things that are permitted to you. Food is permitted to you. Drinks are permitted to you. Are you allowed to be a glutton? Right? Torah also says I have to guard my body. If I don't take care of my body, I'll die. Right? Someone's a diabetic, you're not giving them a hot fudge sundae. And if they do that, throws their whole body out of whack, right? Because it's kind of stupid to do.
sugar,
Right? It's kind of stupid to do. Now, come Friday night, you make kiddush, you can make it on wine. Some people make it on grape juice, whatever. They say, oh, look, does that mean I should drink half a bottle of wine? Doesn't mean that. Right? Doesn't mean I should drink out and I should be an alcoholic. Doesn't mean that. It means I have to take things in proportion. I have to use this world in proportion. Am I allowed to be with my wife anytime I want? Certainly not. Right? Even let's say that wouldn't apply to a non-Jew. Right? At the end of the day, a person could end up killing themselves in the process. Right? You only have a certain level of stamina. Right? We're not going to get. We'll keep it PG over here. Right? But in the end, we're not animals. Right? We're certainly not animals. There are guidelines. Right? Again, I'm not saying the laws of the laws of family purity apply to a non-Jew. I'm not saying that. I think women would think it's great. I don't think men would think it's so good, right? But regardless, if a person looks at his spouse in that way and only in that way, marriage is never going to last, right? Because the woman's not going to want to be treated like that, right? So obviously there's a balance, right? There's a balance that's written within the Torah. So if there's a balance, then I have to know how to use it, right? Now, even though you tell me, things are permitted, what did Rabbi Israel Salanter say? I think we mentioned last week. Rabbi Israel Salanter, the founder of the Musar movement, the movement of ethics. Rabbi Israel Salanter, blessed memory, said that even if you're starving, whatever you eat on your plate, leave a little bit over. Do not eat everything like you're a vacuum, like you're a vacuum cleaner. You just suck it in. Okay, I understand you're hungry. You're being thankful that you're hungry. Very good, right? But leave over something else. Don't just finish everything because you want to show some level of restraint. Now, someone will say, why would I have to do that? Right? Why in the world would I have to do that? Doesn't make sense. So the idea is we're in this world in order to control desires. Now, does that mean desires are going to go by the wayside all the time? No. Desires are still going to be there. But God wants you to function in this world by being in control. When it comes to food, it's idolatry. People are not in control. Right? They just eat and eat and eat and they don't care. Right? Unless it really affects them in a negative way. Then they have to go on diets and whatever. They have to exercise and all that. They'll do it as a last resort, but not because they necessarily want to. So you tell me, but, eating's okay. Drinking is okay. Within reason. Within reason. If, it affects you in a negative way and you're just a compulsive eater, right? So sometimes people deal with issues. They just eat or they just drink. Okay, then that's bad. Then they have to get help. Right, then they have to deal with the issues, certainly that they have to deal with. But if we're given an evil inclination, says the Ramchal, you're given an evil inclination to overcome it. Right, and there are people in this world that work very hard to do that. They won't eat as much. The Vilna Gaon, ate very little his whole life. And when he ate it in a way where he wouldn't get too much benefit from it. Okay, we're not on that level. You can tell me I can't eat ice cream. I can't have something enjoyable. Of course you can, right? But again, is it addicting? Of course. It certainly can be enticing, can be addicting. Whatever it is, you have to eat it within reason. You're allowed to enjoy this world. That's the difference between Jews and Christians. You're allowed to enjoy this world, right? The thing is, you have to know how to use it. If you don't use it properly, you abuse it, right? And any of these things 100% can take you away from proper service to God. Is knowing what's going on in the world necessarily a bad thing? I don't necessarily think it's a bad thing. But I had someone once say, if there's going to be a war, I'll find out about it. Okay, right? Some people have no interest, right? They just cut it off and they say, why do I need to know these things? Why do I have to care? Who said what? In politics, going to be new elections. There won't be new elections. Here in Israel, who cares? Right? Doesn't matter. I have to know what I have to do in order to fight against this virus. What the Ministry of Health says, what I'm allowed to do, what I'm not allowed to do, whatever. Okay. Right? That mean I have to start reading every single article about it? That mean I have to read everyone who spins it and says, some say like this, some say like that, some say the other thing? Okay. Right? There's a whole difference of opinion. No one agrees. Very good. So what? When it comes to politics, even worse. Everyone gives their own spin. Comes to sports, no different. Person says, this athlete's great. Someone says no. Someone says he's lazy. Someone says it. That's what talk radio is, right? That's what, sports talk radio, other things. People get into this, into these things. I'm not saying it's not interesting, right? But one thing is for sure, we're not in this world very long. If we're not in this world for very long, why is that my focus? Why is my focus not on the things that are real? Doesn't everyone agree? Torah and mitzvahs, whatever I have an obligation to do as a Jew or as a non-Jew, isn't that single most important thing? What the rabbis tell us to do, what our obligations are, that should be the single most important thing in our lives. Am I getting closer to God? Am I getting further away from God? That's it. Everything else, all background noise, right? But I have to make sure that's where it stays, right? So the problem is, it's very easy to get caught up in all these things. Person on social media, it's a kiss of death. You see what, everyone's got an opinion. They post this, they post that, they post the other thing. Most of it's bad, and most of it's garbage. Yeah. It's interesting. People find it interesting. People say, I have to answer for God every second. I have to be there answering for God. No, you don't. You're wasting time. You're 100% wasting time. I'm going to make videos. For goodness sakes, if you're not holding anywhere in the world, you need to learn, right? And that's what you need to do. All these things are 100% a distraction. Interesting, very interesting. Distraction, 100%. Yeah.
I do find there are many things out there that are like a fish hook, and you get caught. And it's holding on to you, and it keeps you around longer than you want to be there.
Even though that's true, doesn't the fish try and get off the hook? Because if the fish doesn't get off the hook, what happens? Dinner time. That's it. You're going to fry it. Right? He knows. The fish knows. It comes out of the water, and it's stuck. It's dead. Right? 100% it's dead. Right? So you're right. There are things that entice us. I don't disagree. Plenty of things that entice us. They can be good things. I'm not saying bad things. They can even be good things. Even if they're good things, it could be the evil inclination as well. Right? It certainly could be. Right? So, when we speak about what we say, right, a person we mentioned by the rabbis being a holy vessel, etc., technically everyone should be a holy vessel. So if a person's a holy vessel and they want to be a holy vessel, how can everyday words come out of their mouth? Right? In other words, if I'm supposed to be speaking Torah, that's what I'm supposed to be speaking about. Not about politics, not about sports, not about this. Right? Words that come out of my mouth that most important are Torah. If that's the case and I want to strive and go in that direction, what am I doing? Speaking about these other things. Right? It comes on the Chidah. The Chidah says that someone who's careful when they speak, i.e., they are careful to speak only words of Torah, then what they say is going to happen. In other words, they work on their thoughts, they work on their mind, they work on what they say. So what they say will be established. Now, how do I know? Says the Chidah, where do I know this from? There's a hint in the Torah. Again, it's not explicit, but it's a hint. What's the hint? Numbers chapter 30, verse 3. If a man takes a vow to Hashem, or he swears an oath to establish a prohibition upon himself. In other words, he's making something forbidden. Person says they're not going to eat this, or they're not going to eat that, or they make a vow. They're going to stay away from something. He shall not desecrate his word. According to whatever comes from his mouth, shall he do. Very good. What does that mean? It means that someone should not profane their words. God will establish what he says, just like a righteous person decrees, and God fulfills it. Now, this verse over here tells me a person's going to make an oath and prohibit something that is permissible. He's not allowed to go against his word. If someone said, if you would have known this was going to cause this problem or that problem, would you have made the vow? And the person says no. That's how you can get out of it, right? But if he says it, he has to uphold it, right? So the difference of opinion in the Talmud, whether it's better to make a vow and uphold it, or whether it's better never to make a vow, right? The answer is it's better never to make a vow, because how do I know he's going to uphold it, right? So over here he says he makes an oath. He swears to establish a prohibition. And then at the end it says, according to whatever comes from his mouth, he shall do. Therefore, if he's careful about what he says, whatever he does say, it's going to be established. Right? So that's the hint. It's not direct. Right? I want to say, no, but it's not what it really says. You're right. I'm not saying that's exactly what it says. The Chidah says over here, it's a hint. That if you're careful with what you say based on this verse, it will be established. Comes along the Chofetz Chaim. The Chofetz Chaim says that he was careful with every word, and that he said if a person was careful with every word, as if each word was worth money, right? All the more so would he be careful when it comes to what comes out of their mouth. Because what comes out of a person's mouth has repercussions. Has repercussions in this world, has repercussions in the next world. It could be something, how does that work? Someone says something, for instance, forget about Lashon Hara, we'll make it easy. Someone forbids something. They forbid themselves from eating chocolate, let's say. Right? Now, if they go against what they say, Torah prohibition. If they start eating chocolate without getting out of the vow, that is a Torah prohibition because they didn't fulfill what they said.
Walking contradiction.
Yeah. If a person, let's say, is with somebody they're not allowed to be with, they conceive a child, right? A mamzer, right? Not necessarily a bastard child. It's a child that two people that are forbidden to be together, and they have this child. So that being the case, this mamzer, as he's known, or she is known, is only allowed to marry somebody of the same union or a convert. Now, someone's going to say, come on, why are they allowed to marry a convert? Aren't we a Jew? What are we, second-class citizens? And the answer is a regular Jew cannot marry them either, right? If a Jew came from a proper union, also can't marry this person. Why not? Because there's the blemish in the pedigree. If there's a blemish in the pedigree, right? Therefore, this Jew, who's a mamzer, doesn't matter, male or female, will only marry someone of that same blemish category, right? In other words, they can marry a Jew if they came into existence the same way, or a non-Jew. Now, or a convert. Why a convert? Isn't a convert like a Jew? They come under the wings of Abraham. They go in front of rabbinical court. 100% they're a Jew. But let me ask the $1 million question. Were they born that way? They weren't born that way, right? Their parents aren't Jewish. Even if they may be Jewish, but they can't prove it. Regardless, they have the status of non-Jews. Now, a lot of non-Jews may get upset hearing this. The Jews are the chosen people. That's what the Torah tells me. We are chosen. You know why? Because God chose us. God chose us, took us out of Egypt. made us into a nation. You don't like it, too bad. Then you have to go through conversion if you want to be a Jew. But you don't have that pedigree. I don't care what you feel in your heart. What you feel in your heart, we're going to see. Popkis, it was he say in Yiddish, means nothing. Right? Doesn't matter. You might feel something in your heart that only means that your soul was at Mount Sinai. And you're actually a Jew, but it trickled down. And when it trickled down, you got messed up. Why'd you get messed up? You got messed up through assimilation and intermarriage. And now you're a non-Jewish soul. The only reason you're going to convert is because you have a connection to that soul. No non-Jew, not even you, in a million years would want to become a Jew if you didn't have that spark somewhere.
Right.
But if you walk
100%.
into a synagogue, 1 second, if you walk into a synagogue on Sukkot and you see Jews walking around with a lulav, right, with your palm fronds and a lemon on steroids, right? You got a citron and you got myrtle leaves, you got willows, and they're shaking it in all directions. Most secular Jews are going to say, okay, I know what that is because they've been to synagogue maybe once in their life. They saw what a lulav is. They think it's a little bit strange. Why do you shake it like this and above and this? Whatever, right? A non-Jew looks at it, they're going to think you're an absolute wacko. They're like, what in the world are you doing? What are you doing with this lemon on steroids? Doesn't make sense. A lot of laws within Judaism also for secular Jews, they're going to say it doesn't make sense because their soul is totally cluttered with garbage. Comes along a non-Jew that are not even in the Parsha, right? They have no connection to anything. Why in the world? They're not going to see this as strange? Of course they're going to see it's strange. But if they have a spark that came from Mount Sinai, okay. Right? You know, that's one thing. But if they didn't have that spark, what does that mean? That, you know, someone born a non-Jew, they do not have any pedigree. That pedigree does not go up to Mount Sinai. If they don't have that pedigree, even if they convert, fine. What happens is they become a Jew, very good. But the pedigree seemingly doesn't change. How do I know? Give one very good example. If someone converts, their parents, let's say, stay non-Jews. If that child converts, what happens if the parent dies? So if the parent dies, right, mother, father, sister, brother, God forbid, a child or a spouse, right, a Jew has an obligation to sit shiva, right, to mourn. So what about this non-Jew? What about this non-Jewish parent? So we say that a Jew that converts is katinok shenolad dummy. It's like a child that's reborn. A child that's reborn, fresh slate. If the child has a fresh slate, right, they now become a Jew. What happened to the parents before? Spiritually. Physically, you're going to tell me they're still the parents, right? Biology. Fine. Right? They're still your parents. What about spiritually? If they're considered a newborn baby, they're not related. Right? Question is, can they be alone with them? Can they kiss them? There's a whole lot of laws, right, that they're not really connected. So if they're not really connected, that means there's a blemish. There's a blemish in the genealogy. It doesn't matter if they're Jewish now, right? The fact of where they came from is blemish. That's what it is because they didn't accept the Torah. Now, a person can say that's discrimination. That's a terrible thing. What you're saying is racist. Okay, so the Torah is racist. You got a problem with what the Torah says. Does the Torah say yes or no? Does the Torah say the Jewish people are the chosen people? Yes or no? Yes. Why are we chosen? Because we accepted the Torah. That's the only reason. If a Jew acts worse than a non-Jew, even though he's chosen, does it make him any better? No. Makes him worse.
Wow.
Right? But the fact that he's chosen and he keeps the mitzvahs does not mean we have a chip on our shoulder to say, oh, look how much better I am. It means we have greater obligation. If we don't uphold that obligation and we don't do what we're supposed to do, like 90% of world Jewry today, you know, can you tell in general, forget about the hook nose and everything else, could you tell in general if a Jew is dressed up like a non-Jew, right? Shorts, tank top, whatever. If you didn't know anything about them, right? You hear them speak. Would you think they're Jewish? No. Why would you think they're Jewish? Right? In other words, they're just as non-Jewish as the non-Jews. Comes along Hitler, Yamach Shemoy V'Zichroy, right? May his name be blotted out, may he rot. Did he make any distinction between secular Jews and Orthodox Jews when he murdered them? No. Did he care if their father or mother was Jewish? No. Right? He didn't care if they had, Jewish blood. Right? He killed them. He sent them off. Right? There's a statement by a son of Michael Douglas. Right? Michael Douglas' son said, hey, if Grandpa Kirk Douglas is Jewish, so obviously his wife isn't Jewish. So he says, Dad, so you're half Jewish. That makes me quarter Jewish. So the answer is, doesn't make you Jewish at all, because we go through the mother, not the father. Right? It's a good try, but whatever, it doesn't work. Right? So in either case, why do I tell that story? Because Hitler didn't care. Hitler didn't make any distinctions. He said, you're Jewish, I'm going to gas you. And the secular Jews went out of their minds. Because they said, listen, we fought in your wars, we went to your universities, we married your women, for goodness sakes. We did all these things. We're just like you. We eat the same foods. So what does God say? You can run, but you can't hide. So, and that's what he did. He exterminated all of them. Right?
Wow.
It doesn't matter. He did not have any compassion, because these people wanted to run away. Totally run away. Right? From God, from Torah, from everything. And there was no distinction. So what's my point? My point is that a Jew tries to run away from Torah, marries a non-Jew, does all these things like non-Jews. He's worse than a non-Jew in God's eyes. Right? A non-Jew doesn't have all these obligations. A Jew does. Don't worry, non-Jew has what to do within Torah also. Certainly doesn't have as many obligations, not even close to what a Jew does. Right? That's for sure. So if that's the case, we're our own worst enemy. And we can't, and God's going to say, you know what? You want to go against me? You want to spit in my face? All right, I'll take care of you also. Right? But in the end, you can't hide. You can't hide over here. So over here says the Chaim. Chaim said a person has to be careful what they said. Each word is worth money. Right? They got to be careful. That's why I came on to this. Because you have to be careful what comes out of your mouth, because there are repercussions. That's why I use the idea of a mamzer. There are spiritual repercussions for a physical act. Right? A person makes a blessing over a banana, and he makes the right blessing. Says the Ramchal, goes upstairs, it gets judged, how you made the blessing, where you're holding, blah, 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 comes down in this world. Right? When it comes down in this world, it gets judged. Right? And it comes out however it comes out. Very good. So therefore, that means beyond the shadow of a doubt, there are repercussions. We may not see it. We may not fathom it. Regardless, there are going to be repercussions for what we do. Physical repercussions we can understand. Right? Spiritual repercussions a little bit harder to understand. But we just gave the example. Just gave the example of a mamzer. That is spiritual repercussions. Now you ask me, is it the child's fault that comes out this way? No. It's not the child's fault. There's a reality. Right? If someone is involved in a relationship they're not allowed to be in, they have a child, this is the status. Right? It doesn't matter. The child deserved it, didn't deserve it, whatever. You want to talk about reincarnation, the soul coming in, it has to come back this way, whatever, doesn't matter. The point is that there are repercussions. That is the point I wanted to make. So comes on the Vilna Gaon, we mentioned it before. The Vilna Gaon was on his way to the land of Israel. He got stopped along the way, didn't make it. And he wrote his family a letter about which path they should choose, in life. So he told them that the path they should choose, what's the best quality? Just like the Mishnah here says, best quality is silence. It's even better than fasting. Now, he warned his children. He warned the girls of the family. It's a pretty remarkable thing. He told them they should not go to synagogue. He forbade them going to synagogue. Why? So the women are going to love this. Because a woman's nature is to talk a lot. Even more than men. Even more than men. Right? How careful they have to be in not speaking Lashon Hara. Right? Obviously, men have to be careful also. Right? But it's known women sort of chatter more than men in general. They might say things have changed. Okay, whatever. But, women chatter a lot. So he said it's better to stay home than pray in a synagogue, since the temptation to speak against others will be very high. Now, that's mind-boggling. Why? Because what's the purpose of going to synagogue? Purpose of going to synagogue is to pray. If that's the purpose, And you're talking about the Vilna Gaon's kids. I mean, they couldn't have been slouches by any stretch. They had to be righteous in their own right, right? So why is he warning them? What's the big deal? They're going to pray. They're not going to listen to anyone. No, the Vilna Gaon says that when a woman's going to go, what are most women probably there going to be doing? They're probably going to be chatting. They'll be chatting with others, right? Because when a person gets together in a social setting, what do they want to do? They chat it, right? They chat. Men do it, women do it, etc. But if the whole purpose is to pray in the synagogue, and that's what a woman's going to do, and the temptation's going to be very great, says the Vilna Gaon, better that you don't go to synagogue. Because the evil inclination is going to be very strong, because women are going to want to speak. They may speak forbidden things. They're most likely, going to speak about forbidden things. If they're going to speak about forbidden things, you are better off praying at home. Yeah, question.
Yeah, we got a question from Aaron out there while you're on the topic of how the Yatserhara, can flare up in certain scenarios. The question from Aaron is, does the Yatserhara get stronger in a non-Jew as they begin to try to follow Judaism or Torah? Does the Yatserhara actually get stronger as you grow in that regard?
Yeah, there's some of the commentaries say that the evil inclination for a non-Jew coming into the process of wanting to convert, multiply it by infinity. That's how strong it is. So I asked my Rabbi about it once. I said, it's hard enough. They have to go through this whole process. Jews don't want them. Non-Jews don't want them. They have to move and all that. Why, according to these commentaries, why does it have to be so strong? Why does the evil inclination have to be so strong? So Rabbi says it's like a weeding out process, right? In other words, anyone who's going to convert, God wants the cream of the crop. He doesn't want any pretenders. He wants the cream of the crop, right? So just like anyone who goes to medical school, right? First year of medical school, they weed out 30%, right? Second year, they weed out another 15%. Why? Because people aren't going to make the cut. And they want people that are going to be doctors, etc. They want them to be top of the line. They want them to, see how they do under pressure, other things. And the ones that survive, maybe they cheat, maybe they don't, whatever the case is. They want the best of the best. Right? That's what they want. So when it comes to Judaism, it's no different. Right? In other words, converts giving the Jews a bad name throughout the millennium, but anyone who wants to convert, you're going to have to go through the ringer. Right? It is definitely not going to be easy. I had probably some of the best students, started my classes a number of years ago. And when they started the classes, within a few weeks, they had a problem with their car, the fridge went, few other things go, and they said, Rabbi, does this normally happen? I said, well, for you, it just happened a little bit earlier. For other people, it happens over time. You just got whacked all at once, right? So, I said that kind of tongue in cheek, but, at the end of the day, I'll tell you what the statistics are. The statistics are that 80% of anybody who starts the conversion process, even if they're accepted by a rabbinical court, 80% do not finish. Right? I want that to sink into people. That means a baseball player, if he's batting 200, he's at the end of the lineup, or he's got someone else platooning. He's not staying in the lineup, right? If he's hitting 200, right? Unless he's a power hitter and he's got to find his groove or whatever. If he's hitting 200, unless he's a shortstop, right? Unless he's a shortstop, or a catcher or whatever, he'll be in the, that's it. He's not going to be in the lineup, right? Now, if it's 20%, if it's less than 20% that actually finish the process, there are a million reasons why, right? It's not really the topic for now, but there are a million reasons why. It could be because of a spouse, could be they can't move, could be, could be they have kids at home and they don't want to convert, and that's going to be an issue. Could be any number of reasons. They can't move, right? That's going to be a major issue. Anyone who can't move in the process of conversion, you can't convert because you have to live amongst the Jewish people, for better or for worse. So for that is probably the hardest thing, I think, for most people. But a person has to understand, I'm not saying people are not legit and people don't want to seriously convert. Yeah. I think people have to know what they're up against. And I get people tell me, a lot, that, they're serious or whatever. And, one of the things people ask is, well, how do you know these people are serious? I said, well, first of all, I'll send them information. I'll send them a couple of, classes I've given. I want to see where they're holding, if they can, handle what I say, the information, whatever. And then I speak to them. And then when I speak to them, I'll speak to them for, let's say, an hour, maybe more, maybe less, whatever it is, just to get a feel for where they're coming from. And either after that conversation, these people are still full in, and they say, Afal PK, and even so, I still want to convert. I don't care how hard it is. I don't care if you throw me under a ditch. I don't care if my spouse dies. Whatever the case is, I'm going to go through conversion. Okay, some people, thank God, I'll never hear from them again. And the reason is because they didn't know what they're in for. Right? They had no idea how intense it is. Right? I mentioned the story before. My wife thought she was, very intense, growing up and this and that until she met me. And so she met me, she's like, wow. She's like, this is like intensity, intensity plus. I mean, whatever. But if a person is not in it, full steam ahead, and it's not on their radar, it's not the most important thing going to be in their lives, they'll never convert. Never. Right? It has to be the single most important thing. And if you have to get out of Dodge, in my language, that's what you got to do. Right? If you really want to seriously convert, you have to get out of where you live. Right? Doesn't mean you can't necessarily take my classes until that point. But if a person says, I can never leave where I am, that's it. That is a kiss of death. You cannot convert. Right? It's not going to make sense for you to convert. There's nowhere to pray, there's nowhere to go. You're in the middle of nowhere. Right? That's going to be the end. But does a person have an evil inclination? Oh, there are a million ways you have an evil inclination. I'll say, okay, here's a prayer book. I'm going to, I'll give you information, how to pray. You have to learn Hebrew, but I don't, that's the only class I don't teach. So it means I'm a one-man wrecking crew. I take care of everything else. So imagine there's even a synagogue nearby. You start going to services, you don't know how to pray. You don't know when to stand, where to bow. You have no idea what's going on. Extremely frustrating. It can take a very long time for a person finally to feel comfortable. They know what's going on. They know what they're supposed to do, but a person can be broken by that. They can't read Hebrew, right? They're crushing every word, so to speak. It takes them a long time, and they have to practice. They have to get up to speed, right? A rabbinical court doesn't care if they know how to speak, conversational Hebrew like an Israeli. They want you to be able to read prayers out of a prayer book. They want you to say blessings. They want you to be able to follow a prayer service. Right? Okay, some more, some less, whatever it is. But that's going to be extremely frustrating, and it's going to be extremely humbling. Person can throw in the towel right there, because if you go to church, in your home language, you understand what's going on. When to stand, when to bow, when to this. Very easy. You know all the songs. You know all the hymns. You know when the pastor's going to cough. You know all this. You know when he's going to speak about Hagona Tzaddik Dennis the Menace, right? Calvin and Hobbes. You know when he's going to bring in that. Very good. You go into a synagogue, you are lost.
Right.
100% lost. It's a very, very frustrating thing. Not to mention, okay, you want to keep Shabbos, right? You want to keep festivals. You want to make blessings. You're going to make a million mistakes. You're not going to have any idea what to do, right? So it's a very humbling experience. So someone's going to ask, okay, if I have all these things against me, right, how do I get through it? So I say, everything is a building block. You got to learn, you got to review, and you just got to keep learning, and you got to practice, right? Which we're not going to get to tonight, obviously, but right, it's not just about thinking about what to do. It's about actually putting it into practice. Now, if I would tell everyone, put into practice everything in one shot, you won't be able to do it. It's too hard. Right? There's too much information. You have to take it in stride. That's why the conversion process does not take less than 2 years. It can take longer. It doesn't have to take so much longer, but within 2 years, a person should have the requisite knowledge, at least to know what's going on, and to know how to make blessings and do other things in order to keep what you need to keep. But are you basically being punched in the face with two hands behind your back? Pretty much. Right? With you got a Louisville Slugger being hit upside your head. And it's frustrating. Comes along the evil inclination. Evil inclination, what is it going to tell you? Very simple. Evil inclination is going to come and say, you know what? You don't even know how to pray. You don't even know how to make blessings. You're not even going to be accepted.
Right.
The Jewish community doesn't want you. You're going to get hammered by family and friends and all that. And you're going to ask the $1 million question. What's the $1 million question? Why am I doing this? Why am I doing this? I get made fun of, and people say things, and Jews say things, and they tell me I can just be a Noahide. I can still eat shrimp. I can still do all these things. You don't think the evil inclination going to sit back? He's not going to sit back. He's going to be 10 times worse than me. He's going to come, bam. He's going to hammer you and hammer you and hammer you, and hammer you at all times, right? To see if it's serious, it's not serious, etc. And it's always going to be a test. 100% of the time, it's always going to be a test. To see where you're holding. And a person can be working on things and, they'll take my advice. They won't care what people say. And then someone does something. Someone does something, let's say out of the blue, and it hits them. And they get knocked down. They say, what do I do about this? Yeah, question.
Oh, well, you mentioned things being a test. Rabbi, I really wanted to ask, because this is a personal pet peeve of mine. When people test other people, okay, when there's a deliberate testiness, they want to know something, so they play games with another person in another person's life. I've seen it, especially even when I was in Christianity. I mean, they get groups. I'll give you an example, Rabbi. I went to a Christian retreat one time, a number of years back, and it was actually entitled An Encounter with God. An Encounter with God. And literally, they get their entire group and organization to go behind the scenes in your life and talk to people behind the scenes on the down low, on the QT, and they literally put on this thing and try to, wow you with emotion. And I felt violated, just like, my life was just, but when it comes to being testy, it's one of these things, especially as B'nai Noach, right. I'm not Jewish. I would expect, if I'm going for conversion, that a rabbi has that. You're kind of giving him that degree of authority to say, I need to test what you do know versus, before you move forward. Right, that's respectable. Right. But people that are arbitrarily testy is.
I'll give an example. It's a good question. When I started college, I started university at Columbia University, one of the Ivy League schools. So people were bent on breaking down your philosophical outlook.
Right.
Bent. Why? Because that's what people did. I don't know if it's changed. I don't know if it hasn't. Whatever the case is. People, intellectuals, whatever, they wanted to break down what you thought just for fun. Not just whether they believed it or
but
not.
It's
just
derogatory.
For fun. Yeah. So people get destroyed in such a way. You've grown up with certain values. You held them to be, quote unquote, self-evident, and now you're given information you don't necessarily know how to deal with because the person's only having fun, right? So now I think that's kind of cruel, in a certain way. But again, when it comes to Judaism or anything else, you have to fight for it, right? You have to own it, even if you're brought up as an Orthodox Jew. And you're doing things by rote because you don't want to fry in hell forever, but you have to own it, right? Your Judaism has to be something where, I'm not saying you have to bring out all these questions, and why this and why that, but at the end of the day, it has to be something by choice, not just something you're born into, right? So a non-Jew coming into the process, you got to test them. You have to test them in different ways to see if they're legitimate. Why? Because we don't want any infiltrators. We don't want people coming in trying to missionize. Now, that has been the case, it's been a few times, right? People have actually, thank God, have gotten caught, no question. But you want to make sure people understand, what they're getting themselves into, and you want to make sure, also that they are the real deal, and it's going to be a constant test, whether people like it, whether they don't like it. And I think one of the hardest things is we mentioned before, about rabbinic authority. And non-Jews have been lied to by non-Jews, by, pastors and others and whatever. Why in the world should I listen to you? Why should I lay myself down to the rabbis and this and that. They're also men. True. Right? That's very true. You got to watch, 2 episodes or 3 episodes I did on Tanakh talk about oral law and why there's a mitzvah, why there's a mitzvah to listen to the rabbis. Okay. For a non-Jew, that is probably the single, most difficult thing to do. Now, if a person tests someone for the wrong reason, right? Obviously that's going to be wrong. You're not allowed to, right? But again, a non-Jew coming in, they have to be aware. We don't want you. No offense, right? We don't want you. We're not interested because non-Jew's giving us a bad name, and who's to say you're going to keep it afterwards anyway, right? Which most people think going through the conversion process is the hardest, which is not true. It's afterwards. That's when you need the most help, because you have to see within the first 5 years, that's when someone goes sour, right? That's when someone can go sour. That's when they need 100% the most help, right? But, but your question, yeah, people can test. And I think they have a right to, because they want to make sure the person's the real deal. Up until a certain point. When there's a certain point where the person's been doing things for so long, and they built up trust. Now, again, if there are red flags, there are red flags. But if a person's built up enough trust, they don't have to be tested anymore. A rabbinical court, when they sign off, and they put their John Hancock, they put their name saying that, we attest this person is going to keep what they need to keep and whatever, the rabbinical court is going to be thorough. Some are more, some are less, whatever it is, but they're going to want to make sure you are 100% the real deal. In that, as far as they understand, you are not going to go astray. Is that a guarantee? It's not a guarantee, right? But they want to make sure, as clear as possible, that you're not going to go sour later.
That's wise.
It's not an easy, it's not an easy thing to do. So if people, if there are people, whether they're rabbis or not, and they put someone through a grind where they don't have to be put through a grind, right? That would be 100% forbidden. Now, if it's done for a better purpose, I'll give you an example. I know of a woman that converted. They asked her all kinds of questions, and she answered everything flawlessly. So they started asking her questions about sacrifices, and then they started asking her questions about purity and impurity, right? Things that she would never have learned, right? So what happens? This person couldn't answer. They started like rapid fire asking this question, that question, another question, and the person didn't have any answers. So this person started to break down. So the rabbi said, "Don't worry, you passed with flying colors. We just wanted to make sure that you don't know everything about everything." Right? So in other words, they did that to reassure that even though she was flawless, I
guess, because I've experienced this where people have just run roughshod. If you're familiar with the phrase running roughshod, it's like a horse that had, used to have snow spikes and run roughshod over somebody. And I've found, and I've been, trodden over in such respects in the past. And I've always had this knack of provoking needlessly, Rabbi, innocently, or asking questions or pushing a matter too far. And sometimes, people take that attitude of running roughshod. And I just find that, to me, that's an act of war. And, but there are people that believe it's their right and their authority. And it goes on, especially amongst the 70 nations. And, you get this posturing that is so unrighteous and so unholy.
I don't think the problem is, I don't think most people care. In other words, they take it, what they claim, to its logical conclusion, even if it destroys you in the process. Even if it hurts you down the line, they don't, they're going to say you're too sensitive, you're this, but they feel you're right. They feel it's their right to do such a thing. Who gives them a right? Right? Who in the world gives you the right? If you're a therapist, a psychiatrist, whatever, you got to get to the bottom of what's going on. Try and dig under layers of whatever. Okay, it's one thing. You're not doing it just to bury the person. You're doing it in order to get the person to see certain things in order to become better. Right?
Like this lady you mentioned.
If you're doing it for, for any other, almost any other reason, and as what you say, you're running roughshod. That's below the belt. That is below the belt. I've had people say things to me and they don't care. they'll say you're too sensitive, whatever. And there are things that, I'm not taking out of context. They're just below the belt. They're totally below the belt, and they don't necessarily think there's anything wrong with it. They have right to say what they want, and that's it. Oh, you hit them somewhere? Oh, that's something else. Do as I say, not as I do. Right? They don't want to hear that for themselves, but they'll do it to others.
Well, Rabbi, this is one of the reasons why I find Torah so beautiful, is because you've got a lot of ethics, you've got a lot of rules laid out, and they're clear and they're decipherable. Even if we can't understand it, we have people we can ask that are experts in it that will enlighten exactly what the core of the matter is. But you get some human behavior that is just off the hook. And, we're living in some unusual times.
I think most of what's out there, because of the cynicism, and everything else, they feel they have a right to say things. And if you take it the wrong way, or you get offended, it's a problem with you. Now, a person can make an obnoxious statement, not care, because they say, I have a right to say this, and if you get offended, it's your problem, right? But there are a lot of things, that people say that are below the belt, that shouldn't be said, right? So I always tell people, you don't have to be a dish rag, right? My wife and I once answered a relative, made a really obnoxious comment, and we just flattened him like a pancake in 30 seconds. Less than 30 seconds. Gave him a snappy answer to a snappy question. That's it. Right, person, wow, you guys are tough. I'm like, you really think you make such a below-the-belt statement, such a crude statement, we're not going to say anything? And that's it. The person never bothered us again because the person was obnoxious. Right?
Well, we can take away from this lesson today, Rabbi, that they've wasted their words and they only have a certain limit, don't they?
But again, the claim is that they could either say, well, I'm just kidding, if you get offended, right, or they could say, what are you being so sensitive? And it's not about being sensitive. I don't think people are aware, or they might be aware, but they don't care. And people have diarrhea of the mouth. They don't care what they say and who they say it to. And if you get offended, that's your problem. You got to suck it up. You got to be mentally tough. Obviously you're not mentally tough. So I realized a long time ago, most people are not interested in a real answer. They're just saying things to say things. They don't think about what they say. I've caught people saying things. They denied it to my face. I said, how can you deny it? You just said it. They said, no, I didn't. I said, you want me to play back the conversation? I was like, what do you have, amnesia? You just said that. I was like, no, I didn't.
Well, that's why we're calling you checkmate.
Yeah, exactly, right. So, okay. People say things, and like I said, they just don't care. I don't believe for a second they're not aware of what they're saying. They're definitely aware, and they'll tell you, well, why are you getting offended? Because you're being too sensitive. In the end, they're trampling on everything you believe in, and they think you're just going to sit there and smile. So they say, fine, I got a question. Let me, then you start hammering them. They're like, gee, what are you getting so uptight about? Okay, answer this question. No, I don't have to. Then you get a whole argument. Right? Most of the time, it's not worth it. Yeah.
I guess our Mishnah, though, so far today is really about keeping that in check, is it not? And can we summarize it? Because I do have to get up to my next broadcast shortly. But,
the point is you got to be careful what you say, right? As the Chaim says, if words were like money, right, we'd certainly be careful. But I don't think people are aware in any way, shape, or form of how far-reaching the repercussions are.
Huge.
And sometimes they'll say, well, maybe they don't care, right? And I had a conversation with someone months ago, and I said, this has gone on for a very long time, and I said, bottom line is you could care less. That's the bottom line. So I said, I don't have relationships with people who can't, reciprocate, and I gave up, right? Whether I should have, I shouldn't have, whatever. I said, I gave up. Now, this person was, I was very surprised, was intellectually honest. They said, you're right. They said, you're 100% right. I said, good. I said, ball's in your court. I said, I'm not making any effort because there's no one to talk to. You want to show that you're someone to talk to? Prove it. Prove it. Right? I don't need to waste my time.
So.
I don't need to waste my time because I know what's going to come out of your mouth. It's not, not pleasant to listen to. So you want to work on it. You want to this, okay? You don't. I'm not losing any sleep over it, right? And what's the argument people, I'll let you go with this, right? What's the argument people will make? They say blood is thicker than water. So what if it's thicker than water?
Difference between apples and oranges.
And once you intermarry, what happens? You're not family anymore, right? You go out the window. What about these laws? And what about this? So what if blood is thicker than water? Well, you're still related. I mean, I get that a lot from different, different ways from different people. Okay, it doesn't matter. Doesn't matter.
Well, Rabbi,
water doesn't change anything. Yeah,
I firmly believe you're a man of integrity, and you wouldn't speak clearly these ethics the way you've been teaching us, unless you not only just studied them or just even believed them, but you live them and you walk them. And
you have to be careful. It's not easy. The evil inclination comes very strong, right? What we say, what we think, or whatever. We spoke at the beginning. For all these things. Is it good for me? Is it bad for me? Speaking badly, bad thoughts, bad things I see, whatever it is, everything has an effect, right? So even you surprised me because I thought at least we get a little bit further in this mission. Okay, we'll hit it.
I tried to be quiet today.
No, it's good. There are very good things that came up. No, because you asked someone's question. We got off topic on that, but it's good. It's good.
Well, Rabbi, I want to thank you for this lesson. And I know you've got, was it Tish B'Av this week?
Thursday's going to be a fast day. Friday, Wednesday, sundown to Thursday, sundown. So full day fast.
So tentatively, are we still on for next Saturday?
Shouldn't be a problem. That's only Thursday. You still got Friday and Shabbos. So, yeah, it should not be a problem.
Well, Rabbi, I want to thank you for today's lesson. There's so much there. This is something that we could review over and over and over this lesson. Folks, feel free to share it on social media. You can find Rabbi Coffman on his website, orthodoxconversion.com. You can find him on YouTube, Facebook, social media. He's out there, folks. Check him out. Give him likes, share his material, and feel free to support him. He's just a wonderful rabbi who's pouring out his heart from a studied perspective. And more than that, it's the true light of Torah coming out of Israel. So, Rabbi, till next week, I look forward to it because these classes are life-altering. They give us the ethics we need to begin to actually put into practice. And I think today's a lesson that's something we could all digest and learn from over and over and over. So thank you very much. So till next week, folks, we're going to sign out. Have a wonderful, wonderful week.